Hey everyone, welcome back to Full Spectrum Frontiers. I'm your host, Bennett Tanton, veteran, entrepreneur, dad of 4 daughters, and the guy who just won't shut up about how geopolitics is slowly elbowing its way into your living room. Today's episode isn't for the faint of heart, but don't worry, it's not doom and gloom either. This is about awareness. It's about agency. It's about decoding the signals the U.S. intelligence community just handed us in their 2025 annual threat assessment. It's not buried in bureaucratic fluff anymore. They're basically waving a red flag and yelling, "Heads up." If you're new here, this podcast is about the full spectrum of conflict: economic, military, political, digital, and cultural. And more importantly, how that spectrum bleeds into your everyday life. I don't care if you're a farmer in Nebraska or an engineer in upstate New York. This stuff matters. And if you've been listening for a while, you already know we don't just spot the problem. We frame it, break it down, and ask, what does this mean for us? Now here's the core premise for today's episode. We're living in a multipolar world where old alliances are shifting and new threats are aligning. China isn't just a peer competitor, it's a calculated, methodical adversary pushing hard on all fronts, economically, militarily, and in the information domain, with Taiwan at the center of gravity. Russia, far from being isolated, is doubling down on nuclear deterrence and gaining support from both Iran and China. North Korea, once a rogue outlier, is now benefiting from Russian backing to enhance its ballistic programs. And Iran? It's sitting on a stockpile of enriched uranium, not building a bomb, yet, but the window to act is closing. The lines between state and proxy, Cold War and hot, deterrence and aggression are blurring fast, and we'd better start paying attention. That's not my tinfoil hat talking. That's the U.S. intel community laying it out in black and white. And the question is, what are we going to do with that information? So today, we're going to break this down into 3 clear segments. First, we're diving into China's grand strategy, why Taiwan is the focal point, and how this isn't about war tomorrow. It's about shaping the conditions for dominance over the next decade. Second, we'll pivot to Russia, Iran, and the rise of new global fault lines, how old enemies are forging new bonds, and why that matters far beyond the battlefield. And finally, we'll look at North Korea's quiet pivot from wild card to coordinated threat, and what that tells us about the broader threat landscape. This episode isn't just about military posturing. It's about energy policy. It's about economic dependency. It's about cyber warfare. It's about the future of American sovereignty in a world that no longer plays by Cold War rules. If you haven't already, please hit that follow button, share this podcast with someone who still thinks foreign policy only happens in Washington, and leave a quick review if this show's made you think differently. It's how we keep growing, and how we keep this mission going strong. All right, take a breath. Center yourself, and let's step into the fog together. So let's talk about China. Not in the headline-chasing, buzzword-heavy way most media outlets do, but in real terms. Strategic terms. The kind of terms that matter if you're trying to understand what the next decade is going to look like from a national security, economic, and societal perspective. Here's the cold reality. China isn't just building ships and missiles. They're building narratives, systems, alliances, and dependencies. What we're witnessing is the long game, a methodical push for global preeminence without firing a shot. It's Sun Tzu meets Jack Ma meets Xi Jinping. China isn't preparing for war. It's preparing for control. Too often we simplify the situation to, will China invade Taiwan? As if that's the only litmus test of danger. But focusing only on the kinetic side of things misses the full picture. China doesn't need to invade today to win. They're preparing for a scenario where the U.S. loses its will or its ability to respond at all. Control the narrative, control the economy, control the seas, control the skies, and eventually control the outcomes. They've already built the world's largest navy by ship count. They've militarized artificial islands in the South China Sea, illegally, by the way, and they're continuing to intimidate Taiwan through airspace violations and disinformation campaigns. But all of that is just the tip of the iceberg. Psychological operations at scale. China is running one of the most effective psychological and influence operations the world has ever seen, and they're doing it without having to hack anyone. Why? Because they own huge chunks of our digital infrastructure. TikTok isn't just an app for dance videos, it's a massive data mining, attention shaping, opinion influencing weapon. Its algorithm is opaque, its moderation policies are unclear, and it's engineered to push divisive content in the US, while promoting nationalism and education in China. Think about that. Our youth get chaos. Theirs get calculus. And it doesn't stop there. Chinese companies own key interests in Hollywood, in agriculture, in real estate, and pharmaceuticals. They're the #1 producer of the raw materials for US pharmaceuticals, including antibiotics. You want to talk supply chain security? We are already in a form of dependency warfare. The Belt and Road Trojan Horse. Then there's the Belt and Road Initiative, BRI, a sprawling network of debt diplomacy masked as infrastructure development. China goes into developing nations, offers massive loans for infrastructure they can't afford, and when the countries default, China takes control of critical ports, transportation hubs, or mineral-rich land. It's not charity, it's colonialism by spreadsheet. They're locking down resource access and logistical footholds around the globe, ports in Sri Lanka, railroads in Africa, mines in South America, and now Arctic shipping routes. Their presence is growing in places we used to dominate, and it's happening while we're arguing over budget ceilings and banning plastic straws. Economic espionage and tech dominance. Let's be blunt. China steals. They don't even hide it. Intellectual property theft costs the U.S. as much as $600 billion annually, and China is responsible for the lion's share of it. From aerospace to AI, they use cyber, corporate infiltration, and forced tech transfer to leapfrog the innovation ladder. And it's working. They are building 5G networks across the globe. Their chip manufacturing capabilities, while behind ours today, are closing the gap fast. Their AI and quantum research are at or near parity in several areas, and they're laying the digital groundwork for a China-centric internet with surveillance baked in. Remember, the future isn't going to be fought with tanks. It's going to be fought with bandwidth, power grids, and code. Why Taiwan matters more than you think. Now, let's talk about Taiwan, the microchip capital of the world, and the trigger point for potential global conflict. Over 90% of the world's most advanced semiconductors are made in Taiwan. If China takes Taiwan, peacefully or not, they essentially control the bloodstream of the digital world. Phones, satellites, missile systems, data centers, gone or compromised. That's not a regional issue. That's a global chokehold. China knows it. The US knows it. The question isn't if Taiwan matters. It's how far we're willing to go to protect it. And Beijing is playing the long game. They don't want to destroy Taiwan. They want to absorb it, slowly, through economic entanglement, diplomatic isolation, psychological pressure, and military intimidation. The frog in boiling water method. And if we're not paying attention, they might just succeed without ever firing a shot. America's blind spot. Strategic inconsistency. Here's our problem. We respond, they plan. We argue over the definition of recession while China plans a 50-year trade dominance strategy. We downsize our military while they build 350-plus new ships. We outsource critical industries while they subsidize theirs into dominance. The U.S. still holds the advantage, but only if we stop coasting. We need serious investment in domestic semiconductor manufacturing, cybersecurity infrastructure, military modernization, strategic alliances like AUKUS and the Quad. And maybe most importantly, education that creates critical thinkers, not just diploma holders. Because right now, China is betting on one thing, that we'll keep looking inward and arguing with ourselves while they outflank us on every front. So, what can you do? Look, I get it. You're not the Secretary of State. You're not running DARPA. You're trying to get your kids to school, keep your business afloat, or maybe just stay sane in a chaotic world. But you can do something. Start by staying informed. Don't let TikTok be your only window into the world. Demand better from your leaders. Ask the hard questions about where your stuff is made and who owns the companies you support when the stakes were high. And I'd argue they don't get much higher than this. Let's switch gears. While the media's been preoccupied with hot takes and culture wars, something far more consequential has been happening in the background. The resurrection of old powers and the quiet formation of a new global axis. I'm talking about Russia, Iran, and a few other players that don't traditionally sit at the same table. But now, they're sharing drinks, shaking hands, and making deals. This isn't a sequel to the Cold War. It's a remix. Same track, new collaborators, different beats, but the end game is familiar. Erode U.S. influence, expand regional power, and rewrite the rules of global order. Russia. Not isolated, recalibrated. Let's kill a narrative right out of the gate. Russia is not isolated. Yes, the West threw sanctions at them. Yes, NATO expanded. And yes, their economy took hits. But did that stop them? Nope. They adapted. They found new markets, new allies, and frankly, a new swagger. They're still in Ukraine, still pumping gas, still launching satellites. And now? They're deepening ties with China, Iran, North Korea, and other authoritarian-leaning regimes. The West thought they were playing chess. Putin? He brought poker chips, and he's bluffing less than you think. Russia is not trying to outpace the U.S. militarily. It knows its limits. What it's doing instead is maximizing asymmetry, cyber attacks, disinformation campaigns, energy blackmail, proxy warfare, strategic alignment with troublemakers. It's guerrilla geopolitics, and it's working. And here's the kicker. Russia's nuclear doctrine isn't some dusty relic. They've modernized their arsenal, lowered the threshold for nuclear use in doctrine, and they're very open about using it as a tool for coercion. Not just defense, leverage. We're no longer talking about mutually assured destruction. We're talking about selective deterrence. Use it once, tactically, and watch the world blink. Iran, the shadow player. Now let's talk about Iran, because this is the part where the fog gets thicker. Iran isn't running tanks into neighboring countries, but don't mistake that for inactivity. Iran plays the long game through proxies. Hezbollah in Lebanon, the Houthis in Yemen, Shia militias in Iraq and Syria, all trained, armed, and funded by Tehran. They don't need a standing army when they've got a regional network of chaos on speed dial. And now, Iran has enriched uranium to over 60% purity. That's not a weapons program yet, but it puts them within spitting distance of breakout capability. Translation? If they wanted to go nuclear, they could make that call and move fast. The intelligence community says there's no active nuclear weapons program. And maybe that's true, for now. But intentions can flip. And Iran has shown time and time again that it's willing to play the long game, bank leverage, and extract maximum concessions before anyone blinks. Oh, and in case you missed it, Russia and Iran are trading drones for tech. Russia uses Iranian drones in Ukraine. Iran gets access to advanced Russian surveillance and aerospace capabilities. That's not just barter, it's military fusion. Proxy warfare is the new normal. This is where it all comes together. Russia backs Iran. Iran funds militias. Militias hit U.S. assets. Russia denies involvement. It's all very convenient and very hard to respond to directly. And that's the game. Create a world where everything is just deniable enough to avoid full-scale war, but damaging enough to hurt U.S. influence and drain our focus. They want us divided, stretched thin, spread out across a dozen crises so we're never able to concentrate force. They're not trying to beat us in open battle. They're trying to bleed us through complexity. Think about it. Ukraine, Taiwan, Syria, Iraq, the Red Sea, cyber attacks, space domain threats, and domestic chaos. That's not a coincidence. That's a pressure campaign, the emerging axis. So let's map this out. Russia, nuclear power, military aggressor, energy blackmailer, disinformation engine. Iran, regional destabilizer, proxy godfather, near nuclear threshold state. China, global power broker, economic manipulator, tech rival, and strategic umbrella. North Korea, wild card turned tool, now integrated into this growing anti-West network. And behind them, other opportunists, Turkey, Venezuela, Syria, maybe even India, flirting with neutrality if it benefits them economically. This isn't an axis of evil, it's an axis of leverage, held together not by ideology, but by shared enemies and mutual benefits. And while it's not as clean as a NATO-style alliance, it's becoming increasingly functional. They don't need to love each other. They just need to hate us enough to work together. What's the U.S. response? The U.S. still has the most powerful military in the world. We've got more allies, more money, and more innovation than any of our rivals. But that advantage doesn't mean anything if we don't use it wisely. Here's what we need to get serious about: rebuilding credible deterrence. That doesn't mean going to war. It means being so prepared, so capable, and so committed that nobody wants to test us. Investing in allied defense systems, especially in Eastern Europe and the Middle East. No more half measures. If you want partners, treat them like partners. Disrupting the proxies. Don't just strike the pawns. Cut off the money, the training, the comms. Make it harder and more expensive for Iran and others to project power through shadows. Hardening the homeland, cybersecurity, energy independence, manufacturing resilience. We can't talk national security while outsourcing our critical infrastructure to the same people trying to undermine us. Narrative warfare. Yes, this matters. Russia and Iran are running propaganda campaigns across social media, foreign news outlets, and fringe echo chambers. We need to stop pretending this is just a PR problem. It's a weapon. We can't afford complacency. Look, I get it. None of this sounds uplifting. But here's the thing. Acknowledging the threats isn't fear-mongering. It's strategy. It's preparation. And it's our responsibility as citizens to stay engaged. This axis isn't invincible. It's fragile, opportunistic, and internally unstable. But if we don't counter it with purpose and focus, it could shift the balance of global power in a very real, very long-lasting way. So we've got a choice: ignore it, minimize it, politicize it, or address it head-on with the tools, alliances, and resolve we already possess. As Americans, we've always done our best work when the stakes were high, and I'd argue they don't get much higher than this. let's talk about the Hermit Kingdom. You know the one, North Korea. The place most of the world only thinks about when they see a missile test on the news, or a meme about Kim Jong-un's hair. For decades, North Korea has been dismissed as an isolated, unpredictable regime led by a guy who looks like he's trying to cosplay as his grandfather. But here's the catch. North Korea isn't as isolated or as irrelevant as we like to believe. From wild card to strategic player, North Korea used to be the global equivalent of a toddler with a hammer, unpredictable, noisy, and occasionally dangerous. But today, they're evolving. Not in terms of moral character or democratic reform, don't hold your breath, but in terms of strategic positioning. They're no longer just a rogue state shouting into the void. They've become a functional component of the anti-Western alignment we talked about earlier. And that should give us pause. Think about it like this. In a multipolar world where China, Russia, and Iran are all playing chess, North Korea is the pawn that became a knight. Unstable? Yes. Dangerous? Definitely. But now it has purpose, protection, and partners. Russia's new best friend. Let's zero in on what's changed. In 2023 and 2024, Russia began cozying up to Pyongyang in ways that raised eyebrows, even in Beijing. We're talking arms deals, intelligence sharing, and rumors of Russian tech support for North Korean weapons programs. Why? Because Russia needs help. Their war in Ukraine depleted stockpiles, strained alliances, and triggered Western sanctions. Enter Kim Jong-un, offering artillery shells, drones, and possibly even manpower in exchange for, you guessed it, nuclear and missile technology. This isn't some backroom black market deal. It's state-level barter, and it's shifting North Korea from isolation to integration. And don't forget, when North Korea gets Russian help, it gets better faster. Their missiles are flying further, more accurately. Their satellites, yes, they've launched them, are improving. And if they ever get hypersonic capability from Moscow, that changes the game. A nuclear legacy that keeps growing. Let's not mince words here. North Korea is a full-blown nuclear power. We used to say aspiring or developing, but those days are gone. They have warheads, they have delivery systems, and they've conducted multiple successful nuclear tests. Their latest ICBMs reportedly have the range to hit the continental United States. Let that sink in. And with every launch, they're not just flexing, they're testing, learning, and signaling. These aren't tantrums. They're tactical messages to Washington, Seoul, and Tokyo. They're saying, we're still here, we're stronger, and we've got friends now. They're not bluffing, and we shouldn't pretend they are. Cyber, satellites, and the expanding toolkit. Here's where it gets even more interesting. North Korea has a cyber army, and it's not some nerd in a basement with a modem. It's a state-backed digital warfare unit that's pulled off high-profile attacks, stolen crypto, and infiltrated defense networks globally. They use that cyber cash to fund weapons programs and propaganda. They've also launched surveillance satellites. Sure, they might not have SpaceX-level tech, but give them time. They don't need the best. They need enough to tip the scales regionally and throw our defense calculations into chaos. And now, with Russia and possibly China giving them backup, North Korea might start exporting cyber tools to Iran or helping proxies across Asia. In other words, they're not just stacking weapons. They're joining the global conflict ecosystem, the propaganda war and psychological playbook. Here's a less obvious piece. North Korea excels at propaganda. Inside their own borders, they've created a cult-like control system. But outside, they've started adapting. Their broadcasts are more sophisticated. Their social media operations, yes, they have them, are getting slicker. They've begun shaping narratives not just at home, but abroad. And in a world where disinformation wins wars before bullets fly, that matters. It's all part of the strategy. Destabilize perception, sow doubt, control the tempo. And if that sounds familiar, it should, because that's the same playbook Russia and China are running on a global scale. It's no coincidence that North Korea's tactics mirror theirs. They're learning, adapting, and evolving in real time. What it means for U.S. security. Let's get to the point. If you're sitting in the Midwest thinking, well, this doesn't affect me, I've got news for you. It does. North Korea's missiles can reach California and possibly beyond. Their cyber attacks target American companies and banks. Their coordination with Russia helps sustain wars that drain our resources and global influence. Their provocations force us to keep forces in South Korea, Japan, Guam, and the Pacific, which stretches our global posture thinner and thinner. And what's their goal? Simple. To drive a wedge between the U.S. and its allies. Make South Korea question our commitment. Make Japan nervous. Force us into a reactive stance. Because in this new geopolitical order, the side that can control the tempo wins. What do we do about it? Here's the silver lining. North Korea is still vulnerable. Its economy is garbage. Its people are starving. Its regime survives on repression and illusion. But with new friends and new tech, it becomes harder to corner, harder to contain. The U.S. needs to do more than just posture. We need to strengthen trilateral cooperation with Japan and South Korea, less bureaucracy, more coordination, invest in missile defense, not just in the Pacific, but across the homeland, expand cyber resilience, because every bite they steal funds the next threat, deter without provoking. Kim wants attention, but he fears real war. Leverage that balance. Cut off tech proliferation. If Russia or China is handing over rocket science, we need to expose, disrupt, and retaliate diplomatically or economically. And maybe most importantly, we need to stop laughing off North Korea like it's a cartoon villain. That mindset is dangerous. It makes us underestimate, underprepare, and ultimately underperform. The bigger picture. North Korea isn't leading this new world order, but it's playing a role, a strategic, destructive, and emboldened role. In the past, we worried about what they do alone. Now, we need to worry about what they're capable of doing with help. So while the media chases clicks and politicians chase polls, the rest of us have to chase truth. And the truth is, North Korea is no longer the mad dog barking at the gate. It's become part of the pack, and that pack is hunting together. All right, let's bring it in. We've covered a lot in this episode. We walked through China's long game, how they're not just prepping for war, but building a world where they win before a single shot is fired. We unpacked how Russia and Iran are no longer fringe actors in conflict, but key architects in a new geopolitical architecture, a messy, gray zone battlefield full of proxies, pressure, and precision moves. And we looked at how North Korea, once a solitary outlier, is now part of an emerging pack, armed, enabled, and emboldened. This is the shape of modern conflict. It's not the Cold War. It's not World War III. It's not even hybrid warfare anymore. It's full spectrum, everything, everywhere, all at once. Political, military, economic, cyber, psychological, spiritual. This is what we mean when we talk about the frontiers of national security. But, and this part matters, it's not too late. The United States still has unparalleled resources, innovation, alliances, and influence. We still have the edge, but edges are temporary. They dull, without discipline. They disappear without vision, and they fracture without unity. Here's the truth. Geopolitics isn't just something the Pentagon or the State Department deals with. It's not just a DC problem. It's a kitchen table problem. It affects gas prices, job security, the integrity of your data, the medicine in your cabinet, and your kids' future in a world where alliances mean everything and complacency is a liability. So, what do? We stay engaged. We get curious. We ask harder questions. We demand competence from our leaders instead of charisma. We build where we can. We protect what matters. We stay sharp, not scared, not cynical, but aware. Look, I'm not here to sell fear. I'm here to sell clarity. Because once you see the battlefield, you're no longer just a bystander. You're a player. And this battlefield needs more people willing to stand firm in the middle of the noise and say, I see what's happening, and I choose to care. So if this episode made you think a little deeper, if it connected dots you hadn't seen before, do me a favor. Share this podcast with someone who needs to hear it. Leave a review on your favorite platform, Apple, Spotify, wherever you're listening. Subscribe so you don't miss future episodes as we push deeper into this space. You can also find me on social media or over at Full Spectrum Frontiers, where this podcast is part of a much bigger mission, connecting dots across conflict, culture, and consciousness. This isn't just about war games and headlines. This is about understanding the systems that shape our lives and making sure we're not sleepwalking into a future someone else designs for us. Until next time, stay grounded, stay curious, and as always, stay on the frontiers.
In the fiercest battle, I'll defend you from all these arrows, and the sword I wield will keep you from danger. Let me be your shield.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just you, me, and the odds. We stuck together, we two peas in a pod. You dealt a bad hand, I'm there seizing the cards. We'll never be separated till we see in the gods. We've been low together, high forever. Long as we go together, we'll die whenever. Be a light, couldn't let the darkness try you ever. Truth in my word, you I lie to never. And when the world gets a little too hard, wipe your eyes, put away your sorrow. When it's war, I'll be leading the charge, and I'll be still fighting for you tomorrow. Yeah, even with a blindfold or in different time zones, could find my way to you with my eyes closed. There's nothing between us. Go to Mars and Venus, stand in front of every one of them rocks they slinging and be a shield. Yeah.
In the fiercest battle, I'll defend you from all these arrows, and the sword I will keep you from danger. Let me be your shield. You may be facing tribulation, but don't let it get you down. What I'm saying may take patience, but you're gonna make it out. I scorched my own 2 feet to pour